love, no devil love. Rasta man still stand. Yeah, you know, I Rasta man still stand. I don't want to sit up in a them Wolfpack congregation. Rasta man still stand. Them tell themselves that them are honest citizens, yeah, of Christian nation. That's the man. Yeah. Oh, Levitical priesthood sell out our nation. Peter and Paul sell out our nation. Them play the man and that the Vatican in a man. In the order of Melchizedek, Selassie I stand. Rasta man still stand. Okay, you know, I Rasta man still stand. Well,
I'm here to present to the community and for the followers of Baba TV a calendar. The name of the calendar is called NoopooH School. Basically, what NoopooH School means is gods of the cosmos. Basically, in the northern hemisphere, this calendar is basically from the only for the northern hemisphere, because when we're in the southern hemisphere, we see a different set of constellations that basically come from the Libra cycle going all the way around. This particular calendar starts from the Aries cycle and goes all the way around. The reason why this calendar was constructed was because as I was studying the different constellations, I noticed that the Zodiac that we were currently going by was a pseudoscientific science, meaning that it didn't have any basis behind it, and scientists basically, you know, confirmed that these constellations had no type of factual evidence to back them. So, in understanding that, I had to go into the research, and one of the things that I researched, I found out that the Dendera was created by the Caucasian race. Now, of course, you know, I explained this on Sixth Dynasty yesterday, that the got the Zodiac, or basically the Dendera, that was constructed in Africa was a result of the Ptolemaic and the Alexander the Greek regime going into Africa and basically taking over Africa and replacing many of the things that we had there. Now, one of the main things that we understood that it was done by Caucasians was the way how they sculpted the Dendera into the ceiling. The way how they sculpted the Dendera into the ceiling, they use a method called bas relief. If you look into what relief is basically the way how people sculpt things into carvings and things like that. The Indians would use something called high relief. High relief is when you carve things out of stone that comes out. It's like a 3D image. And bas relief is basically or low relief is when the carvings come out just a little bit, but when you look to the side of it, you can't recognize it. You'll have to paint it in order for people to recognize it. So what the Caucasians did was use a particular carving technique called bas relief. Now, what our ancient ancestors used to use was a technique called the sunken relief. The sunken relief meant that they carved into the stone. You know, if you're at your computer and you're doing a little bit of research, just look into what sunken relief is, look into what bas relief is, and then you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. So, as a result, the Zodiac is definitely a Caucasian creation. Now, upon research and doing further research, I realized also that many of the stars and the constellations around our universe mimic basically what's in the bodies. Actually, we mimic what's in the stars because the stars come before us. You know, a lot of teachers have said, you know, we're stardust or we're made of stars, but people don't really understand what that means. But when you go into each one of these constellations, you realize that each one of these stars basically mimics what's going on in the body. We're living in a very sickly time right now, and because we're living in a sickly time, most of these stars are dying or appear to die, meaning that they're swelling beyond the normal size that they're supposed to be. So, for instance, We have the Aries constellation. The main star in the Aries constellation is called Spica, S-P-I-C-A. And Spica right now is basically dealing with calcium issues. And calcium is one of the main components that's needed for bone marrow. You understand what I'm saying? So these stars mimic exactly what's going on in the body. The Capricorn constellation mimics what's going on in the bladder. Actually, the Capricorn lives in a part of the universe which is the most watery part of the universe. As I was doing research on the stomach, there's a part of the universe that's called the Great Rift. The Great Rift is basically like the food of the universe. So the food is going into the stomach and going through another constellation called, I believe it's the Cygnus. The Cygnus represents the neck. And if you do any etymology on the names of the stars, you'll see it represents the mouth. It's also representing of the throat or the esophagus that leads down into the stomach and through this area called the Great Rift. So many of these stars represent exactly what's going on inside of the body. What's very interesting as well is that from the bone marrow going all the way around is the same exact way that a baby gestates in the womb. The baby gets its bone marrow first when it's first conceived, and as it's going through its processes, it basically gets its skeleton, then its flesh, then its lungs, its heart, its brain, all the way around until you get to the what? The last part is the genitals. That's the last thing to fully develop in a baby. That's why they tell you can't see the baby's gender until around 4.5, 5 months. So this calendar is just letting us know that the universes are acting the same way that our bodies are acting. So as above, so below was just not something to be said in ancient Egypt, because they understood that what was in the stars was also inside of our bodies. And this is a very, very important thing moving forward. One thing that we don't see on here is the jet pillar, which represents the spine. That's when the next calendar that I create, you'll see the jet pillar going down the middle of this calendar. Reason being is because our ancestors understood that the jet pillar represented the cervical articular pillar, which is right in the back of the neck. And the top of that pillar is called the Atlas. Now, what did the ancient Africans use as the Atlas? They used the star Polaris. And Polaris is called the Atlas. They used it for navigation. Now, why is this important? Reason being is because the top, which is called the C1 cervical articular pillar, allows your neck to move from what? From east to west, north and south. So the top of the spine is really your Atlas as well. The second star is called the axis, which sits upon it, and then there's a bone that protrudes up is called the dems, and that basically allows you to navigate even further. You go to the right, or you go to the left, up, down, whatever the case may be. Now, the top part of the spine is called Ursa Minor, right? They call that the little bear. Then the bottom part of the spine is Ursa Major. I'm talking about the constellations. The bottom part is called Ursa Major, or the lumbar part of the spine. Now, why would they call these two constellations the little bear and the great bear? Reason being is because the English language is a very confusing language. So we know that the spine does what? It bears the weight of the body. So this is why they switched the word around. Instead of the little bear and the big bear, they call it the one that bears the weight of the body. So it's not a little bear. This one is the little bear because it bears a little bit of the weight, and the big bear is at the bottom of the spine. That's why when you lift any heavy object, what's the first part of the body to hurt? The lower part of the back. That's the big bear, because it basically takes on the burden of all the bear that you're lifting up. So we understood that they'd use a lot of these words to trick us and turn around a lot of what we already knew. And when you confuse a people like us like that, it's going to take us away from what it is that we already knew back then. But my job is to basically bring us back to what we already knew. So now, if you look a little closely, I know would you be able to zoom in, Baba? These little balls right here, these little balls that you see here that are black and white, basically that represents basically the day. And the ancient Egyptians understood that the daytime was called Aket and the nighttime was called the Duat. Alright, so it was the Aket being sunlight and the Duat being the shadow hour. Basically, those were two completely different cycles. Now, it was combined into one day, which meant another cycle. But we understood that when the sun was up was a completely different cycle from when the sun is down. Basically, yeah, so the ancient ancestors understood that there were two different cycles within one day, which was the Aket and the Duat. Now, the Caucasian had to flip that around and give us something called AM and PM. Now, I don't remember exactly what the full name for AM and PM is, but AM and PM is not a good depiction of what the day should represent. What the day should represent should be when the sun is up, because there's different energies that take place when the sun is up, and there's different energies that take place when the sun is down or the moon is out. So we need to understand that our cycles need to run concurrent with nature, because nature is what everybody should be going by. And since we're on the topic of nature, we have to understand that the new year is not the real new year that we go by, because everything is cold, dead, there's no leaves on the trees, all the animals are hibernating and sleeping, but we call that the new year. Why is that? Because the Caucasian has to go against everything that the African has presented. So the natural way of knowing when New Year is around is when the plants are starting to grow leaves again, when the animals are now coming out again, when they're starting to mate with each other. And I'm sorry? Huh? Yeah, gotta take a picture. Yeah, so we have to understand that the new year is really where the spring season is starting, where flowers are starting to bloom again, where things are starting to renew and basically get into position of gestation and things of that nature. So our new year really starts in March 20th or March 21st, around the time that the vernal equinox kicks into effect. Now, most of the holidays that I have around here is in direct opposition to what we follow today. Like, for instance, I give you a holiday like Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is a day of stealing. They basically steal from many different cultures, and then they're basically celebrating this horrendous holiday where they had mass massacres and things like that. So I had a holiday which is called Creative Inventors Day. And Creative Inventors Day means that you're giving back to the world. You're giving back your inventions. You're basically giving back instead of stealing. We don't want to have a holiday where we're celebrating stealing from other cultures. This is not something that we want to do as a people and as humanity. Now, one of the other holidays we have on here is Malcolm X's birthday. Now, Malcolm X preached to separate from the Caucasian race. The reason being is because when we integrated with them, it allowed them to basically manipulate us and to take from us. And it hasn't been good for us ever since we've done that. So we have to give back this holiday as far as Martin Luther King is concerned, and that's not to put down Martin Luther King, because I love Martin Luther King. He's a part of my race, but he was tricked into what he was doing, and that's why they murdered him after he was tricked. And if you listen to his last speech, he said that, you know, he regretted this whole movement that he did and understood that, yo, this white man is out to trick us, and he got royally tricked. And the day right after he made that speech, they took him out. So we have to understand that he was used against his will. And Malcolm X was one of those people that wasn't used against his will. He was very strong in his opinions about what black people should do and how we should separate from the white man. Now, and there's nothing wrong with separation. If you look at the communities in New York City, like the Jewish community, do you see any black people living in the Jewish community? Hell no. You could never go on, and then you could never go buy property in that Jewish community. They won't allow you to make money off of their community. But guess what? They all over our community. Same thing with the Chinese community. You'll never see any black people living among them. And if you living among them, you got to pay them rent. You got to pay them a insurmountable amount of rent. So we have to get back into basically adopting our culture again and getting back into understanding that we need to create an economic system in which our money can fluctuate for each other. Now, I love what's going on around here because we're spending money on all of these businesses, and those are black businesses. All these businesses are black businesses, and I love the fact that we're spending the money amongst us. But we need to do it on a global scale now. This is just a small scale, but we need to do it on a global scale. And one of the main things we need to do is adopt our own calendar, because a calendar is a very powerful economical tool. Because every time you have a calendar hung up in your house, you know when Christmas is coming, you know when Thanksgiving is coming. So what does that mean? I gotta go to the store and buy a turkey. I gotta go to the store and buy this. I gotta go buy a Christmas present. I gotta go do this. And what does that mean? There's more money into the Caucasian's pocket. Now, I'm not against the Caucasian race, even though I'm speaking against what's going on. What it is I'm more for my people than I am for hating another race of people, because I don't hate the Caucasian race at all, but I understood what they did, and the only way that we can defeat that which hates us is to have love amongst each other and to embrace our own culture, embrace who you are. Once we embrace who we are, then that whole hate that they have for us is going to disappear, because there's nothing that they can do that's going to stop us from getting to the level that we need to get to. So this calendar is basically just a start to getting our economic means going, to getting our spiritual means, and basically changing our physical outlook and how we supposed to be doing things. Now, the only reason why I put the months on the outside is because this is just a tool for letting us know exactly where we are as far as the regular calendar is concerned. But this is the calendar that we're supposed to be following, the one on the inside. The one on the inside is the one that we're supposed to be following. Each one of these weeks is divided into 9 days. The reason why it's divided into 9 days is because we understand that each day of the week represents a planet in the solar system, sun or one of the orbs in our solar system. Sunday is the sun, Monday is the moon, Tuesday is basically Mars, and so on and so forth. Saturday is Saturn. So we want to be able to now give the planets their due honor. Like, for instance, Earth doesn't even have a day in the week. We get Earth in like April. There's one day for Earth Day. Like, that's just ridiculous to me. We're supposed to be respecting Earth every single day, but at least give Earth one day out of the week. How do you give reference to each one of the planets and orbs and not give reference to the planet that you live on? That doesn't make any sense to me. So we need to make sure that Earth has a day each day of the week where we respect Earth, where we understand and we study Earth, and how can we replenish Earth and keep Earth healthy and vibrant again. Because as we see it today, Earth is being drilled with oil and things like that. This is why the planet is wobbling. The planet is an organism just like me and you are organisms. You understand what I'm saying? I'm an organism. If you drain the blood from me, I'm going to start to shake myself, because you're going to go into a shock. And that's what we're doing. We're putting the planet into a shock when we're drilling all the petroleum, which is really the blood from the planet, and you're causing the planet to shake. So we want to be able to honor Earth every single week, and we got to put this greedy regime down. And it's not just the Caucasian race. You got also Arabs that come into our community and ravage our communities, and they friend us up and things like that, but they don't ever put any money back into the community. Do you ever see the Arab come in there and say, you know what, I'm going to put to your black schools? They don't do that. And that's not to say I hate the Arabian culture or race. That's just to prove that black people don't know the kind of spell that they're under. We're spending money on the Chinese food. We're spending money in the Arab stores. We're spending money in all these different cultures. The Jews own everything, and we're spending money everywhere, but they're never going to put back into who you are, bettering your schools. They're not going to give you a Whole Foods in your neighborhoods if you're next to the projects. They're not going to do any of those things. So we have to get back into understanding who we are and what our culture is. So back to the days of the week. 9 days out the week. That means 8 planets and 1 sun. Pluto is not a planet. That's a fact. Pluto is not a planet. It's basically a figment of somebody's imaginations. Do the research. So the next thing now is to explain. I'm just going to give some references basically of some of these solar systems like I did earlier. Like, the Liver constellation has a main star called Zebin Shimali. Zebin Shimali, as scientists looked at it through a microscope, is basically a white star covered in green mist. Now, why is this star a white star covered in green mist? That's because the Liver constellation represents what's in the body, which is the liver. Now the liver creates a green substance called bile. Bile basically removes waste from the body, and it basically replaces it with oxygen, high rich oxygen. So what is the star Zeb and Shamali doing? The star Zeb and Shamali is basically cleaning its part of the universe and giving it back oxygen, because oxygen is what? The breath of life. When you go into the Bible and things like that, I don't believe in the Bible, by the way, but when you go into the Bible and the Bible talks about the breath of life, the breath of life is just simply oxygen. If you wipe this planet of oxygen, nobody lives. So the breath of life is oxygen. So we have to understand that we have to keep the plants green and growing. We got to keep it green and growing, because the plant does what? It's basically the reflection of us. So as we give the plant carbon dioxide, it gives us oxygen, and it keeps that cycle of life going. So the more plants we keep on the planet will be the more oxygen that we get. But back to this star. So this star is basically mimicking what's going on in the body with the liver. So we have to understand that these constellations are what's already inside of us. Now there's many different much more science that goes with this. You know, hopefully Baba will help invite me, you know, again. So because I don't have my notes on me, I just went off the top about basically, you know, just a basic information about it. But this thing goes deeper. I'm telling you, it goes deeper. Like, you know, even the kidneys, I don't remember the star, but kidneys do what? They swell, and they basically contract and contrast. The stars in this, they basically contract and contrast, and they call those stars the ellipsoid, meaning that they spin so fast, and stars are plasma. So that means they're able to shape themselves. They basically compress, and then they expand. Compress, expand, compress, expand. So stars are amazing things. If you go into the study of stars, which is what's it called, astrophysics, then you would find some amazing things. But definitely this zodiac is pseudoscientific, but this right here, far from pseudoscientific. Do the research like I've done the research, and you guys will see that this is just a very small start into getting the revolution kicked off. And I want to thank Baba, and I want to thank Baba TV. I want to thank Sinetta as well, because Sinetta allowed me to get on his platform. I want to thank Six Dynasty. I want to thank NoopooH, NoopooH. That's my kin. I know my culture is called Noon. Hold on, my culture is called Noon, and this is our symbol. This symbol is called the Nahus. This N represents Noopoo. This Z represents Zupu, basically positive over negative. This coil at the bottom represents the kinky hair that we have on our heads. I have kinky hair, as you can see right here. All my hair is kinky hair, you know, and basically we're the only people with kinky hair on the planet. And we have a different origin than any other race on the planet. See, the Caucasian knows that he comes from different forms of anthropoid monkeys, basically tailless monkeys. And if you go into the taxonomy of where these tailless monkeys come from, they're all called great apes. But we, as the African race, do not come from great apes. We come from pygmies that resided in Africa. Now, you can go do the research and you can find out, you know, more about that information. Now, I also want to give thanks to Afro-Unu. Afro-Unu was the man that brought forth the science known as Noon, spelled N-O-O-N-E. And the science of Noon is the science of mental resurrection for black people and all peoples in the world. So if you want to get a chance to get the books that I read from, the name of the books is called The Introduction to the Nature of Nature. They're written by Afro-Unu. You can email me at noponoone@gmail.com. That's NOPONOONE@gmail.com. If anybody else I want to thank the sun. I want to thank the earth. You know, they got to be given praise. I want to thank my mother and father for creating me as well. Those are the gods that created me and allowed me to come forth to this planet to bring this information forward. Anybody else to thank? You know, if I missed anyone, I'm sorry. I'll thank you on the next time I do another interview. And I want to say true peace to everybody in the world. And I love everybody. I love everybody. But the truth has to come out. The facts have to come out. You know, and once you accept truth, then you can break all spells and break all chains of oppression. So thank you, Baba. Thank you, Baba TV. and true peace.